You thought you knew the price of a plane ticket, but you have no idea what the real cost of air travel is until you understand who is standing in the shadows of the tarmac. Code Red. Terminal 5, December 14, 2016. The time is exactly 5:47 a.m., while most of London is still wrapped in the heavy silence of a winter morning. The world is about to shatter for one man. Right now, as you are watching this, a convoy of unmarked vehicles has surrounded a quiet residence in Grange Gardens, Banstead. Heavily armed officers are stacking up against the door, preparing to execute a warrant that has been 15 months in the making. Inside sleeps a man named Joysen Jhurry. To his neighbors, he is just a shift worker, a 41-year-old baggage handler who clocks in and out like thousands of others. But as the battering ram smashes through his front door and he is dragged from his bed in handcuffs, the facade crumbles. His world is exploding. But to truly understand the magnitude of this moment, we have to rewind the clock just 12 hours. 12 hours before the handcuffs, that same man, Joysen Jhurry, walked through the high-security checkpoints of Heathrow Airport like he owned the place. And in a terrifying way, he did. You see that family over there, exhausted, loading their heavy suitcases onto the carousel. They are completely oblivious to the fact that the man handling their luggage has just made £16 million disappear into thin air. He has turned their innocent vacation bags into weapons of mass deception. For over a year, Jhurry did not just handle baggage. He handled the most audacious, high-volume drug smuggling operation ever uncovered on British soil. He took the one thing you trust blindly, the luggage carousel, and transformed it into a cocaine. Highway. He almost got away with it, because he possessed the ultimate camouflage, invisibility. Jhurry did not need to break into Heathrow with guns, or rappel down a skylight like a movie villain. He did not need to hack the mainframe. He was the system. He had legitimate security clearance, legitimate access codes, and the legitimate trust of one of the busiest airports in the world. This is what makes the story you are about to hear so disturbing. It is not about a breach from the outside, it is about a rot from the inside. But here is what will terrify you most. This is not just about one corrupt baggage handler looking for a quick payout. This is about his brother-in-law, his colleagues, his family, an entire network of airport insiders who turned the infrastructure you rely on for your safety into Britain's biggest drug depot. And if you think this is just about drugs, you are not thinking big enough. The same hole in the fence that lets a kilo of cocaine in can let something much darker in. Before I show you exactly how they did it, and trust me, once you understand their method, you will never look at an airport the same way again. You need to understand that this operation was a masterclass in logistics. Smash that subscribe button, because what I am about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about the invisible people handling your luggage. The story gets darker from here, and it starts with a magic trick that fooled the entire world. You know, that moment when you finally collect your bag from international arrivals. You are tired, jet-lagged, and dragging your suitcase toward the final hurdle, the exit. You see the signs for the red channel goods to declare, and the green channel nothing to declare. You tense up slightly as you walk past the customs officers. Even if you have done nothing wrong, it is a universal reflex. But what if I told you that for the most dangerous bags entering the country, that choice between red and green was completely meaningless? What if I told you that the bag filled with millions of pounds of narcotics never even went through international arrivals in the first place? This was the fatal weakness that Joysen Jhurry exploited. It was a structural blind spot that turned 80 million passengers a year into unknowing accomplices and reduced the airport's fortress-like security into a porous sieve. Here is how it is supposed to work. International bags arriving at Heathrow from high-risk zones like South America are tagged and coded to go strictly to international carousels. From there, passengers collect them and must face the scrutiny of Customs and Border Force. That is the sterile zone. That is how the border remains secure. But Jhurry had a different plan, a plan that relied on a terrifyingly simple act of misdirection. Working with his colleague Muhammad Ali, a 41-year-old insider from Slough, Jhurry did not just guess which bags to grab. This was not a game of chance. They would identify specific suitcases arriving on flights from Brazil, not random luggage, but specific vessels packed with high-grade Colombian cocaine worth millions. These bags were marked, tracked, and anticipated. Then came the magic trick that fooled an entire airport security apparatus. It was a logistical ballet performed right under the noses of supervisors. Instead of allowing these drug-filled bags to travel down the belt to international arrivals, where customs officers and sniffer dogs were waiting, Jhurry and Ali would intervene. In the bowels of Terminal 5, away from the public eye, they would physically pull these bags off the international line. With a simple movement, they would redirect them onto the belts destined for domestic carousels. Think about the implications of that switch. It sounds like a minor administrative error, but in the world of border security it is a nuclear option. Domestic flights arriving from Manchester, Edinburgh or Glasgow, do not go through international customs. Why would they? You are already in the UK. By moving a bag from belt A to belt B, Jhurry effectively laundered the luggage. He stripped it of its international status and gave it a domestic identity. While customs officers were diligently watching the international exits, the cocaine was circulating peacefully on a carousel just a few hundred feet away in the domestic hall, waiting to be picked up without a single question asked. It was a sleight of hand performed on an industrial scale, and the most frightening part, to the airport's automated systems, nothing looked wrong. The bag had simply arrived, but while the bag was safe, the operation needed one more crucial element to succeed: someone to pick it up. And that is where the scheme moved from the hidden tunnels of Heathrow to the public concourse, recruiting a cast of characters you would never suspect. Meanwhile, across the skies of the United Kingdom, the second half of this deception was already in motion. Couriers who had boarded routine domestic flights, short hops from Edinburgh to London, or Manchester to London, were buckling their seatbelts for what looked like completely innocent journeys. To the flight attendants and fellow passengers, these travelers were indistinguishable from the businessman on a day trip, or the student returning home. But as soon as their wheels touched down at Heathrow, their phones would buzz with a notification that changed everything. These were not just text messages, they were digital instructions for a heist. The message would contain a photograph, a grainy but unmistakable picture of a specific suitcase. It might be a blue Samsonite with a frayed handle, or a black hardshell case with a distinctive ribbon tied to the zipper. Think about the genius of this for a second. You are a courier. You have just legally flown domestically within the UK. You walk off the plane and head to baggage claim like any other tired passenger. You check your phone, spot the target on the carousel, and lift it off the belt. Because you have arrived on a domestic flight, there is no customs gauntlet to run. There are no dogs sniffing for narcotics. There are no officers asking you where you have traveled from. You collect a bag containing millions of pounds of high-grade cocaine, place it on your trolley, and walk straight out the front door into the London air. To everyone watching, you look like just another domestic passenger collecting their luggage. You are hiding in plain sight. But the brilliance of this operation was not just in the logistics, it was in the personnel. The organizers behind this operation, men like Wilfred Owusu and Michael Sutherland, understood something that most criminals miss. The most dangerous criminal is the one who does not look like a criminal at all. They did not hire hardened cartel members or tattooed enforcers to walk through the airport. They recruited people like Moses Awuku, a man born in 1979 with no fixed address who was desperate for cash. They recruited women like Felicia Kufor and Francisca Archer. These were ordinary people, struggling financially, who could be convinced to take what seemed like a simple job. The psychological manipulation here is fascinating and terrifying. The recruiters pitched it as easy money. Just take a flight, pick up a bag, walk out. If a courier got caught, the system had a failsafe built right in: plausible deniability. Because these couriers were legitimate passengers, if security stopped them, they could simply claim confusion. "I thought it was my bag," they could say, pointing to a similar suitcase. "I just flew in from Manchester. Why would I have drugs?" It was a defense designed to cloud the waters, giving the cartel enough time to cut ties and disappear. However, while the foot soldiers were playing their part on the ground, the operation was being orchestrated from much higher up. Joysen Jhurry, was not a lone wolf rogue employee. He was merely the gatekeeper. The real architects of this operation understood that to run a business this risky, you could not rely on strangers. You needed a bond stronger than money. You needed blood. This was not just a criminal enterprise. It was a family reunion gone wrong. And as the National Crime Agency began to peel back the layers, they realized that the rot at Heathrow was held together by the one thing that makes betrayal almost impossible: family loyalty. This operation gets darker because Joysen Jhurry, despite his vital role, was not working alone. And he was not even the mastermind. The real architects of this operation understood something that organized crime has relied on for centuries: the power of blood. Preet Mongra was not just Jhurry's coordinator or business partner. He was his brother-in-law. This brings a chilling psychological dimension to the crime. How do you recruit someone for a multi-million-pound drug operation that carries a life sentence if caught? You do not post a job listing. You do not ask a stranger. You ask family. When Mongra approached his brother-in-law with this opportunity, it likely was not presented just as a business proposition. It was presented as family, taking care of family. This mafia code made the network incredibly resilient. When family goes into crime together, the loyalty runs deeper than money. The trust is absolute because the consequences of betrayal become personal. If Jhurry talked, he would not just be ratting out a colleague, he would be destroying his sister's husband. But while the family bond kept the circle tight, the National Crime Agency (NCA) was listening. They had been tracking cocaine flows into Britain for months, watching the same disturbing pattern repeat over and over. High-grade South American cocaine was flooding into London, Birmingham and Manchester. But investigators could not figure out the entry point. It was as if the drugs were teleporting past the border. But then, they started hearing the phone calls. What they discovered on those tapped lines was worse than anyone imagined. The call logs showed constant frantic contact between UK numbers and Brazil. This was not the occasional coordinate of a desperate mule. This was constant, coordinated communication that rivaled the logistics department of a shipping giant. The British side was not just waiting for drugs, they were ordering them. The Brazilian suppliers had developed what was essentially a franchise model for airport corruption, and Jhurry's family was their prime franchisee in London. The intercepted calls revealed a terrifying level of sophistication. Cocaine shipments were planned weeks in advance. Specific flights were selected based on timing, courier availability, and which corrupt staff were on the shift roster. It was a supply chain managed like any other international business. Except the product was Class A drugs, and the delivery system was your luggage carousel. But here is what kept the investigators awake at night. Based on the volume of calls and the data they were seeing, this network had already moved at least £16 million worth of cocaine through Heathrow in just 15 months. 15 months of successful operation. 15 months of laughing at airport security. 15 months of turning ordinary passengers into unknowing drug mules. The sheer scale was staggering. And it begged the question, how much more was still out there? How many other airports had the same vulnerabilities? The NCA realized they were looking at a machine that was running perfectly. The Brazilian side handled the supply. The Mongra Jhurry family handled the logistics. The Couriers handled the risk. It was a perfect triangle of crime. But every empire has a tipping point. On December 14, 2016, the investigators decided they had heard enough. They knew who, they knew how, and they knew where. It was time to answer the question of whether blood is truly thicker than the steel bars of a prison cell. December 14, 2016. 5:47 a.m. We returned to the moment where the clock ran out. While London slept, a massive, invisible net that had been carefully woven over 15 months was finally pulled tight. Across the city, 200 officers from the National Crime Agency, Border Force, and the Metropolitan Police were poised to unleash the largest coordinated airport corruption takedown in British history. This was Operation Archway. Imagine being Joysen Jhurry at that precise moment. You have been running the most successful drug operation in British airport history for over a year. You have moved more money than you ever dreamed possible. Your family is taken care of. Your brother-in-law, Mongra, has become wealthy beyond imagination. You think you are untouchable because you are the system. Then, the silence of Grange Gardens. Banstead is shattered as armed police smash through your door. In an instant, the illusion of safety evaporates. But the raid was not limited to Banstead. It was a simultaneous strike, designed to sever the head of the snake and the body at the same time. In slow, police descended on Spackman's Way to arrest Muhammad Ali, the insider who helped identify the shipments. They picked up Preet Mongra, the coordinator. They tracked down Moses Awuku, the courier, with no fixed address. They arrested Damien Goodhall, another corrupt handler at Terminal 5. What the investigators found during the searches was staggering. They seized over 100 kilograms of cocaine and 44 kilograms of cannabis, a massive haul by any standard. But that was just the tip of the iceberg, the product caught in transit. The real evidence, the evidence that would bury them, was digital. Investigators uncovered a treasure trove of text messages containing photographs, high-resolution images of specific suitcases sent to couriers. They found call logs showing exact coordination times between London and Brazil, matching flight arrivals to the second. They found financial records showing a criminal organization that kept books, like a legitimate Fortune 500 company. Jhurry was not just getting paid a flat rate for his silence. He was receiving performance bonuses based on the volume of cocaine successfully moved through his airport access. This was organized crime operating with corporate incentives. But here is what makes this story psychologically fascinating. Even as the doors were being kicked in, and the handcuffs were being applied, the network was still trying to operate. Intelligence suggests that as the arrests were happening, frantic phone calls were still being made to Brazil. Mongra was still trying to coordinate. The psychology of criminal denial is powerful. When you have been successful for 15 months, when you have moved £16 million worth of cocaine without getting caught, your brain refuses to accept that it is over. They believed they were too big, too smart, and too integrated into the system to fail. Then came the psychological warfare of the justice system. With the entire network in custody, the prisoner's dilemma kicked in. Who was going to cooperate? Who was going to try to cut a deal? When family members are arrested together, when brothers-in-law are facing decades in prison, loyalty becomes complicated. Everyone knows someone is going to talk. The question is, will it be you, or will it be them? And if they talk first, what happens to you? What emerged from the subsequent interrogations was a picture of criminal sophistication that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. This was not just about moving cocaine through Heathrow. The call logs revealed coordination with other European networks, intelligence sharing with Brazilian cartels, and money laundering operations spanning multiple countries. But before we get to the sentences, and they were severe, I need you to understand that this case became a watershed moment. The trials were about to begin, and the message they would send would be heard from London to Sao Paulo. The trials that followed Operation Archway were not just legal proceedings. They were a public autopsy of the British aviation security system. As the cases moved through Kingston and Southwark Crown Courts, the sentences handed down sent a shockwave that travelled from London all the way back to the favelas of Brazil. But within the courtroom drama, a fascinating psychological experiment played out regarding guilt and punishment. Joysen Jhurry, the man who had the keys to the kingdom, pleaded guilty. He acknowledged his crimes, cooperated with investigators, and likely hoped for leniency. His colleague Muhammad Ali took the opposite route. He fought the charges, maintaining his innocence until the bitter end. The result? Jhurry received 16 years. Ali received 15. Think about that for a second. The man who confessed received a harsher sentence than the man who denied everything. The message from the judge was brutal and clear. When you compromise national security, when you turn critical infrastructure into a criminal enterprise, there is no deal to be made. The betrayal of trust is the crime, and the punishment is absolute. The ringleaders fared even worse. Wilfred Owusu and Michael Sutherland, the masterminds behind the logistics, were each handed 20 years. In total, the network received 139 years of prison time. But these sentences were not just about the cocaine. The justice system was recognizing a terrifying new reality. Airport corruption is not just about drugs. If you can smuggle a suitcase out of an airport without checks, you can smuggle something in. The same hole in the fence that allowed cocaine to enter could have allowed a biological weapon, explosives, or firearms to bypass the border. We were incredibly lucky that this network just wanted to get rich. The aviation industry scrambled to plug the hole. Heathrow immediately implemented new multi-checkpoint baggage tracking systems. Background checks for employees with airside access were overhauled, and the specific vulnerability regarding domestic carousels was addressed at major airports worldwide. Operation Archway became a case study in security training manuals globally. But if you think this story ends with the bad guys in jail and the airport safe, you are mistaken. It is now 2025, 9 years after the takedown. You might be watching this video while planning your next vacation thinking this is ancient history. You would be wrong. The Brazilian cocaine networks did not retire when Jhurry went to prison. They evolved. Intelligence reports suggest that similar operations continue to probe airport security across Europe. Just months after the Archway sentences, investigators caught a courier named Joysen Jhurry trying to smuggle cocaine hidden inside a hollowed-out Parmesan cheese wheel. The methods change from suitcases to cheese wheels, from carousels to cargo holds, but the intent remains. The financial incentives for airport employees have not disappeared. The family-based recruitment methods that made the Jhurry network so successful are still being used right now, somewhere, by someone else. The franchise model of criminal corruption is alive and well. So where does that leave you? The next time you are standing at an airport carousel, watching the belt go round and round, remember this story. Remember that the person handling your bag might be a hard-working professional, or they might be the weak link in a global criminal chain. You are no longer just a passenger, you are a witness. The Heathrow betrayal proved that the systems we trust are only as strong as the people running them. And sometimes, the most dangerous people in the room are the ones wearing the official uniforms. Do not let your guard down. If this investigation opened your eyes to the invisible war happening in our airports, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because the criminal networks are not sleeping, and neither are we. We will see you in the next investigation.